Katie, welcome back to the Scholarship GPS podcast. I am so thrilled to have you here. Just about 4 weeks ago, from when people will hear this, I sent out an email mentioning your podcast, and then before we hit record, I mentioned I was just listening to another episode of your podcast, and almost jokingly because I don't have the time for it, and also I don't want to rip you off. But I thought I could start a second podcast where I just take Katie's episodes and say, do everything Katie says, but plug it in this way for scholarships. So that's why I wanted to have you back on the show. I think the work you do is tremendous,
Thank
and that
you.
what you're helping students with just fits so seamlessly with helping them with the scholarship project. So thank you
Thank you.
for coming back on the show.
Of course, that was the neatest intro I think I've had.
Well,
Very cool.
seriously, I mean, anybody who's not listening to your podcast is really missing out, parents and students. So, and I learn things that I implement just for me to do my business better. So, yeah, highly recommended.
Appreciate that. But I
Yeah.
think what you're talking to is what you do and what I do, there's a huge overlap. And so it would
Yep.
make sense that even though as each of us, is recording our podcast and having these conversations and we're just talking to a microphone in a way we're having a conversation.
Right. Right.
I specialize in executive functions
Mhm.
and, study skills and strategies to learn and work smarter, which is the name of the podcast. And what you're doing is with the scholarships, all of that requires significant executive functions
Yes. Yep.
and strategies to learn and
Mhm.
work smarter. So it makes sense that we have this kind of digital conversation going, so
Exactly.
to speak.
Absolutely. Well, the topic for today is motivation. I, especially over, say, the last month or so, have seen a lot of parents in Facebook groups posting a variation of something like, how are you getting your kids motivated to apply for scholarships? And having worked in this business, with students beside my son for many years now, I know that that's an issue. I think the one piece of magic that we had with my son was that he was pretty self-motivated. So when people ask me that question, I have ideas, but this is much more in your area of expertise. So I would love to hear your thoughts on, I guess maybe we'll just start there. Like if you were responding to somebody on Facebook saying, how do I get my kid motivated to apply for scholarships? Like where would you start?
Really good question. I think that this conversation needs to start with understanding what motivation actually is. And
Hmm.
when we fully understand what something is, then we can figure out how to come at it. And, we have to consider the student or the child that we're dealing with because there are
Hmm.
so many factors. So
Yeah.
motivation in the simplest definition ever is the force that causes us to act
Hmm.
and to act on things that we want to do and to act on things that we don't want to do. And
Hmm.
this force has so many moving parts. It's not one singular thing, right? If you want to develop a bicep, what do? You do, a bicep curl and you're going to
Hmm.
develop that bicep. Motivation does not work like that because there's,
Right.
there's, like I said, so many factors. And once we understand that motivation can be, neurobiological. It can be connected to our neurochemistry. It can be related to mental health disorders like anxiety and depression. It can be related to ADHD and emotional regulation, and we can talk all about that and executive functioning. And so, my first thing that I would say to parents, that was a long way to get to the
Hmm.
answer to your question, but is to ask, is there anything else going on?
Hmm.
Because there are strategies that we can talk about today that if we're talking about someone who's just not motivated to apply to scholarships, that's one thing. And there's a particular set of strategies that we can talk about. But if we're talking about somebody who is struggling with motivation across the board, motivation
Hmm.
to get up, to get out of bed, to take care of themselves, to even engage with things that used to bring them joy, then I'm not a physician and a medical
Yeah. Yeah.
provider, right? And so I suggest that you would seek the counsel of a physician
Right. Right.
just to address, to make sure that there's no other factors going on that is
Hmm.
pulling those motivation levers down.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
disclaimer.
Yep.
With that said, scholarships is a huge project. It is a
Yep.
long-term project that requires skills.
Hmm.
And in my business, teaching executive functions and study skills, I motivation comes up a lot. I'm hearing the same thing from parents. It's
Yeah.
that, why can't my kids study? They're not motivated to study. They're not motivated to do well. They're not even motivated. with grades. And usually my approach is, well, let's look at skills,
Hmm.
because we are never motivated to do things that we can't do.
Hmm.
I mean, sometimes if someone's really intrinsically motivation, that means it's internal and they enjoy the process, right? Then they might be like, well, I can't do this thing yet. I don't have the skill yet, but I can't wait to learn the skill to do it.
Yeah.
And we
Yep.
all wish that our kids had that internal motivation, that
Sure.
we
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
it, right? But
Yep.
that's not how it works.
Yeah.
And so I say to look at the skills. So there could be the issue of someone who's applying for scholarships and understands the importance of that and the
Hmm.
financial impact of, scholarship money. They might not have executive functions. They might not have
Okay.
those skills. They might
Yep.
not know how to plan. They might not know how to organize all the links and the deadlines and, the status of their applications. They might
Hmm.
have a completely disorganized digital space, and they don't know if they're writing, this scholarship essay in this doc, or did they put it in this one, or are they combining them, and their Google Drive is a mess. They might have, if they have ADHD, they might be struggling with emotional regulation.
Hmm.
And someone
Okay.
who doesn't have emotional regulation is going to suffer from low motivation or inconsistent motivation.
Hmm.
Because coming back to that definition, what is motivation? It is the force that causes us to act.
Hmm.
And we cannot look at that without thinking about emotions. Because
Right.
if we don't
Right.
want to act on something, it's something we don't want to do. We don't want to file our taxes. We don't want to scoop the cat litter box. We don't want to, apply for scholarships. Not to say that those three are in the same category, but I'm just, you know what I'm saying.
I gotcha.
We need to have some strategy to bypass that, knee jerk, I don't want to do this.
Hmm.
This is
Right.
a non-instant reward activity.
Hmm.
And that's
Yes.
where some motivational strategies can come in. But if you don't have the skills to mechanically execute on this long-term project and stay with it and ride out the I don't want to do it feelings, which will always come and go, then you're going to be stuck.
Yeah.
I don't think I would put that entire answer in a Facebook post to this mother, right?
Right. Right.
But I
Yeah.
mean, I'm
Yep.
just coming at your question with the intention of making sure that people truly understand that motivation is complex. And if your child
Hmm.
is struggling with motivation, there's not a simple answer,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
There's many ways you can come at it.
Yep. Well, a couple of things that you said there, I wanted to maybe go down a few different trails. So it sounds like, let's say that we have a student who has pretty solid executive function skills, we don't think that that is the issue, that it's just in scholarships in particular where
Mm-hmm.
there's a lack of motivation. You said it's often because they don't know how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I don't want to throw a plug for my own business into this conversation
Please do.
necessarily, but I mean, that is what my course is designed to
Mm-hmm.
teach, is to teach parents and students the process of earning scholarships,
Mm-hmm.
from how to find them, where to find them, how to know which ones to prioritize, looking at best practices for your applications, and then even when you start to win scholarships, how do you squeeze every penny out of them? So, like, there's a solution for that problem, and I have it, and I'm not the
Yep.
only one out there. So,
Mm-hmm.
is that a good fix for if we think that the motivation is strictly they just don't know tactically how to do this?
Yes, I would say so. What you're offering is like the exact, GPS, the roadmap, the
Yeah,
blueprint for how to make these scholarships happen.
right.
And in your program, I know that you teach ways to organize the
Yep.
the links and the spreadsheets and all that kind of thing. So if
Right,
someone has
right.
decent executive functions, that's certainly gonna work for them. If
Hmm.
someone is struggling with executive functions but still has the roadmap for how to apply to scholarships, they're probably just going to need a little bit more parental support.
Okay. Hmm.
Someone who's maybe checking in. Oh, I see you're using this spreadsheet. Let's make sure that we're checking in every week.
Hmm.
That I'm following through. Maybe share your Google Docs with me, right? And
Hmm.
that might
Right.
not be the kind of answer that a really busy parent wants. They might just want to hand off the entire task to their kids, but that's not how it works for every family, right? Some kids need
Right.
more
Right.
supervision.
Right.
But there are some strategies that let's say, even the playing field here, and say someone has strong executive functions and they are inside your program, so they have the roadmap, but they're still not feeling motivated. What
Hmm.
do we do?
Hmm.
Well,
Okay.
that's where I would look at some of the other key factors of motivation, which is novelty,
Mm.
urgency, and relevancy.
Okay.
And urgency and relevancy are probably going to be more in our control in the context of scholarships.
Okay.
Novelty, this concept of newness. Sometimes when people just hear about scholarships and the potential of like, oh, this is $20,000 no essay scholarship that
Yeah.
I can just hit submit, right? There's this novelty, this newness, this excitement of
Yep.
the potential of money, right? And then
Yep.
that fades. The newness of everything fades. And then what are
Hmm.
we left with? We're left with urgency and we're left with relevancy. So
Hmm.
urgency, that's connected to timelines and deadlines. And
Right.
as you know, scholarships have deadlines. So
Yep.
sometimes what I see is an uptick in motivation as a student is getting closer to a deadline. And this is even
Sure.
in the context of applying for college.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
like the early application deadline, and then early decision and the
Early
regular decision,
decision.
and
Yeah.
suddenly they're cramming out
Yep.
their supplemental essays. But the relevancy piece, I'd say that's where parents might have the most control over.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you a story with two separate students that I work with,
Okay.
and vastly different concepts of levels of motivation and concepts of how scholarship money relates to their actual real life. So I had this
Okay.
one student, and BC was his number one school for since he was a sophomore,
Okay.
junior, senior. Got into BC, incredible, not a dollar of money, not a dollar
Yeah.
of aid. And in the conversation we had with his parents said, we can pay for half of this.
Okay.
And the other half is on you.
Right.
And the kid's like, okay, well, I can take out $45,000 a year myself and a student loan, and no big deal. And 45 times 4, what are we talking about? Like 180, no big deal. I can pay that off when I get my first job out of college after 2 years. And I'm thinking, like, what calculator are you using?
Yeah.
Under what
And
math? Right?
also just going to throw in, yeah, the math doesn't work, and also the logistics don't work because you can't borrow that much without a cosigner.
Of course,
So,
of
yeah.
course. It's
Yeah.
absolutely right. But this is
Yep.
just sort of, and so we're talking about, so what we did is and this is I'm going to get to the scholarship piece in a moment,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I just called up I went to like Sally Mae,
Hmm.
and I went to a student loan calculator to
Yep.
talk about the concept of interest, right?
Hmm.
So I'm like,
Right.
so when we take out 180,000, we're not paying back 180,000. Let's talk
Yep.
about what we're really paying.
Yep.
And at this point, he's still like, I am going to BC because I got in and whatever. And to see the amount of money that he was truly going to be responsible for
Hmm.
blew his mind.
Yeah.
And no shame on the parents for not explaining this ahead of time. It's what it is, right?
Yep.
And so up to that point, before I was like, no, this is what it's going to cost you. And a first job out of college, how much of the paycheck do you think you're really taking home? Let's talk about taxes. Let's talk about Social Security. Let's talk about right? And again, no concept of how much money you actually take home in a
Yeah.
paycheck versus what your
Yep.
salary is. And then up to that point, he had no interest in scholarships because he thought he had it under control. He didn't see the relevancy. He had no idea that this money was real and it was going to have to come from somewhere.
Right.
So once he saw those very real numbers, we weren't playing, right? We weren't like, well, hypothetically speaking, we went and we found an apartment. I live in the Boston area. We went and found an apartment because I want to live in Boston. Okay, we're going to find a 1-bedroom apartment for real.
Yeah.
What is this going to cost you?
Right. Right.
Let's look at grocery bills for real. We had real numbers, and he saw that this is not going to be possible.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
me.
It would have been 30 years of his life.
They're easily,
Yeah.
right? And so at that point, he's like, okay, scholarships.
Yeah.
I'm, now I get it. Now I'm going to
Yep.
buy into the scholarship
Yeah.
concept.
Yep.
But until he really truly had concrete evidence that scholarships were relevant to his life, and I'm like, well, now I guess you can't live in an apartment in Boston. You're going to have to live with mom and dad, and that was just like, heck no! Right
Yeah.
now, I need to get scholarships. So
Yeah.
that was his motivating factor.
Right. Yep.
Right? And then the polar opposite. So he was motivated by like an external motivation. So there's intrinsic and extrinsic. Internal
Yep.
is like the result is what it is, but I am here for the process. I don't need the reward. The process itself is the reward.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of motivation that's more that we want everybody to have, that as we become more emotionally regulated and mature, and the part of our brain that is in charge of emotional regulation, which is, a lot of parts of the brain, but prefrontal cortex, as that develops, we can tap more into that emotional intrinsic motivation. And there, I have an example of a student who she's the one who initiated the idea of scholarships. Now, I
Okay.
don't focus on scholarships as a service. I do executive function
Right.
coaching, ADHD
Yeah.
coaching, study skills, and college applications and things like that. But I don't do the financial side at all.
Yeah.
But when
Hmm.
we're doing supplemental essays for college applications, a lot of those essays can function, as a
Yes.
starting point for
Absolutely.
right
Yep.
for scholarships. So anyway, so this student is like, she wanted Tufts, and one of the
Okay.
supplemental essays for Tufts this year was like, I'm not gonna get the wording correct, but like explain why learning is cool.
Okay.
And it was a
Hmm.
really cool topic. And she's like,
Yeah.
it's this prompt that is making me want to apply to Tufts because learning is so darn cool. And this is like a
Yeah.
student of my own heart, right? I'm like, I
Yeah.
know. And of course, she does so well, but she's so intrinsically motivated by the concept of learning, by what she's going to get from the process, regardless of the grades, of putting
Hmm.
in the effort and proving to
Yeah.
herself that she can do this thing that she set out to do. And how cool of a feeling is that when you achieve what you set out to achieve, not as an ultimate result, but as the effort that you put into something
Hmm.
that, is all in the name of that ultimate result that we're going
Right.
for. But
Right.
anyway, so that's a demonstration of her having this internal motivation where she's like, I want scholarships because I got to make this happen. And
Hmm.
so her scholarship journey is so self-guided. It
Okay.
is so she actually joined your mailing list. I was like, you've got to see this guy. We signed her up. I won't say
Nice.
her name here, but I can tell you after. But she is doing, because I'm like, there's so many scholarships that goes out in your newsletter. But she's so motivated. She's not going to need me. She's not going to need any parental supervision
Hmm.
because she has that internal motivation. And
Yeah.
as parents, we want our kids to have that. But
Hmm.
sometimes we have to step in and provide that external motivation
Right.
and the relevancy. Sometimes we need to paint that clear picture of how the scholarship is relevant to them, and that's sometimes what can help them with the internal motivation, if that
Hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, I love both those stories. I mean, that great illustrations of the internal and the external motivating factors at work there. That's fantastic. And by the way, thanks for the referral for
Of
getting her
course,
on my
it's
newsletter
so
list.
helpful. It is so helpful
Yeah.
because
Yep.
scholarships are so hard to find, and you're like, well, here's a bunch every week.
Yeah, yep. I mean that's just practice, I guess. I've
Yeah.
been doing it so long. So, you talked a little bit there about the role of parents. One of the things that I have seen that kind of surprised me is that some people see the college process, the scholarship process, and turning 18, all happening around the same time as like this magic moment, and that all of a sudden a switch is flipped in the kid where they're, quote, an adult. What are your thoughts about that? And like, how do we maybe a little earlier prepare kids to get to this point? You know, for those who have seniors this year, we're maybe talking a little bit later than I would recommend, but I would just kind of like to hear your thoughts on that.
Really good question. Um, every student has their own journey
Sure.
into,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, first of all, how are we defining adulthood? There's the 18, that legal age there, but I view adulthood as the ability to operate independently.
Yep.
And of
Agreed.
course, that's gonna, motivation is a key player in independent
Sure.
operation.
Yep.
And some students, for whatever reason, require more parental scaffolding and support well
Hmm.
beyond 18. But I
Sure.
have some students who are 15 years old, and I keep forgetting they're only 15 in my conversations with them because I'm like, you are just, more mature and
Yeah.
more cognitively developed than some of my 25-year-old grad students, right? So
Right. Right.
you have to respect and honor and really see your child for where
Hmm.
they are developmentally. And with ADHD, and we're talking about, not to always bring this back to ADHD, but if so many people have ADHD, and if your child, I'm speaking to parents listening to the show right now, if your child has ADHD or executive function deficits, we are dealing with brain function.
Hmm.
And the adolescent brain does not just, reach maturity at 18. That is
Right.
absolutely not how it works.
Right.
Even with someone without executive function or deficits or ADHD, their brain is still continuing to
Sure.
develop well into the
Yep.
20s. And
Mhm.
that's that prefrontal cortex area that I was talking about. It's just continuing to grow. And when we're talking about things like scholarships or even college applications and keeping track of deadlines and the supplemental essays and, did I get this rec letter from this teacher and all that, those projects require significant skills
Hmm.
that many adolescent brains are simply, well, first of all, they're not often taught, right? They're
Right.
not
Yep.
taught these skills.
Yes. Yep.
That's what I teach. But even if a student is taught those skills, their brain sometimes can only handle like level 1 or 2 of those skills.
Hmm.
And they
Right.
can execute those skills in a particular context with explicit instruction with some reminders.
Hmm.
And then the context changes. So I might have someone who's good with the college applications and we've got everything organized and the Google Docs and the timelines and spreadsheets and all that. And then they might come over to scholarships and be like, oh, now I don't know what to do. Because it's that
Right.
transfer of
Yeah.
skills that requires a fully developed
Yeah.
brain,
Yep. Yep.
right? So we have to be patient with our kids. We have to be patient. This is their first time. For many parents, it's their first time too.
Yes. Yep.
But as parents, we have fully developed brains
Hmm.
and our kids don't. And so we cannot expect them to have the same level of thinking, the same level of skills as we have. I think that full transparency about expectations is critical.
It's a great point.
So if a parent is saying, this is our financial situation, and they share
Hmm.
whatever to degree, whatever, they want to share with their child, this is what we are able to provide for
Hmm.
your scholarship funding. This is our student loan situation. This is what, FAFSA, this is what we have or we don't have.
Right.
This is what your school is going to cost, right? And this is the expectation that there is this gap that we need to fill.
Hmm.
And like to loop the student into the conversation about the relevancy and why
Yep.
these scholarships matter. It's not just because like I'm a mom and I'm telling you to do one more thing.
Hmm.
If your kid is 18 and you're making the argument that your kid is an adult and should be doing this on their own, then it's my opinion that your kid should be aware of the true reason why,
Right.
right, that
Right.
they have to do this. And I think
Yeah.
that's going to increase the relevancy and, share, however much you want to share about the financial situation. But if a kid is like, all right, there is a $20,000 gap between what my family can, provide and
Hmm.
what the school needs, like, what can I do to help fill that gap? Of course,
Right.
there's
Right.
loans and all of that stuff, but if maybe a portion of it can be scholarships.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think that that's, having these conversations and say, okay, a parent says, okay, there's this $20,000 gap. We're going to ask you to apply to X amount of dollars in scholarships or
Hmm.
X amount of scholarship, number of scholarships. And whether a student gets them or not, that's beyond their control. But applying
Right.
for the scholarships is 100% within your control.
Yep. Right.
But if, if,
Right.
if a parent didn't have this preliminary conversation with their child and just said, hey, it's time to apply to scholarships, okay? Let me know when you're done.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
mean, are you kidding me?
Yes. Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, that is one thing I have stressed for a long time is that the scholarship process, especially for high schoolers, but even for college students, it's a partnership with the student and the parent and guardian. Now, the degree or the kind of partnership will vary depending on the skills and the experience the student has. But just to wake up one day and say you're an adult, go like you said, go apply for scholarships without having that scaffolding in place,
Mm-hmm.
and building those skills prior. This is just too high stakes of a place to drop a kid into
Yep.
without some support. This isn't striking out at their first T-ball game. This is going to affect the rest of their life.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
It's true. I mean, all families have their own parenting strategies and views
Sure.
on rewards. And do we call it rewards? Do we call it bribery? I don't know. Tomato, tomato. But
Yeah.
I have worked with families where in other contexts of, wanting their kid to do something and there's a reward, not
Hmm.
for the
Yes.
outcome,
Yep.
but for the effort. So
Yes.
if you apply to X amount of scholarships for real and not just like the click on the $20,000 no essay scholarship, you know what I mean? If you
Yes.
if you
Yes.
really, and there's evidence in this spreadsheet that you've submitted, for every scholarship you get something from us
Yep.
as a parent.
Uh,
Or
Yes.
sometimes kids do need that. And I imagine there might be a parent listening being like, yeah, but my kid should just get it and my kid should just want it. Sure, but that's
Yeah.
not how it works.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because I that has been a suggestion that I have thrown out to people. And like I said, the motivation piece is not my expertise, but I think that that is a perfectly valid way to help with the motivation.
Mm-hmm.
And also with the caveat, like you were getting at, I would maybe even take it a little step further of I don't want to see just evidence that you applied like a confirmation email. I want to read your essay before you
Yeah.
submit it. I want to
Mm-hmm.
look at that application before you submit it. And
Mm-hmm.
oh, by the way, having a parent or a third party do that, you're going to find some mistakes that the kid didn't, not because they're not trying, but everybody needs a second or a third set of eyes because we don't notice our own mistakes, especially in
Mm-hmm.
writing. We know what we mean to say, but it doesn't always show up on the screen. And I'm guilty of this as well. When I send out a newsletter, I just don't have somebody to review that for me. And so sometimes I'll read it, I'll read it and then it's sent, and then I read it when I send it to myself, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I say there? Or, I missed a
Happens to
word.
all of
So
us. Yep.
yeah, yep. But yes, it's my business, but honestly, it's still a lower stake situation than a student trying to get a scholarship, and that they
Mm-hmm.
really do need somebody to review that, check for mistakes, provide some suggestions, and then if you are giving some kind of reward to validate that this is a reward worthy submission,
I
regardless
believe
of the
so.
outcome. Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yep.
going back to that concept of very clear expectations,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
meeting that with the point that you just said, if parents are saying, okay, you're going to get this reward, or yeah, a reward for every X amount, and I'm going to read your scholarship essays. I think no kid wants to feel like their parents are breathing down their neck and nagging,
Sure.
and no parent
Yeah.
wants to nag. Nobody ever
Yeah.
wants nagging,
Yep.
right? And so maybe if there's a clear expectation set up front, like every Friday, or every Saturday, we are going to, your parents, we are going to check
Yep.
and log into your thing, and you're going to
Hmm.
show us. And I
Yeah.
won't I won't ask you about it. I
Hmm.
won't ask you about it Monday through, maybe a midweek check-in, just because that's like a lovely thing to do. Hey, just
Sure.
letting
Yeah.
you know, like it's
Hmm.
Wednesday.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Just to
Little
make sure.
reminder.
A little
Yep.
reminder, that's
Yep.
perfectly fine.
Hmm.
But that's so there's no, we don't want to have these gotcha moments, right?
Yeah.
That's not how
Yep.
we support our kids. We don't,
Hmm.
nagging them doesn't, and doesn't work. And if a parent's thinking, well, if I don't nag my kid, then they don't do it, then they don't, Friday comes around and I log into their thing and it's empty. Well, what do I do then? Well,
Hmm.
maybe the reward wasn't motivating for them. So
Right.
loop
Right.
in the student with, what do you want? What would you like as a reward?
Hmm.
Because if you say, well, for every scholarship essay that you write, we're going to buy you a book. And a
Mm.
kid is like, I hate books.
Yeah.
Well, what a
Right.
terrible reward. If someone
Yeah.
were like,
Yep.
Katie, I'm going to
Uh-huh.
get you like a lug nut for every thing you do. I'm going to be, you take your lug nuts,
Yeah.
So
Yep.
that's, you have to like
Yeah.
loop a student in and say, what would be motivating to you?
Yeah, yep. And
Food?
by the way, I mean, sure, this might cost you, the parent, a little bit of money, but oh
Mm-hmm.
my goodness, it's going to be so much cheaper, assuming your student has even a tiny bit of success with scholarships than what it was going to cost you otherwise.
It's true.
Yeah, yep.
It's true.
I have one more kind of road I'd like to go down, and then we'll wrap up because we're probably running a little bit late on time. But one of the things that you often say, and I might not say use the wording you do exactly, but is that action is as close to magic as we
Yeah.
have. Am I
Action
quoting you
is the
right?
closest thing we have to magic.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Um, I want to relate that back to maybe parental motivation and maybe through the lens of scholarships. I often see parents saying, all these scholarships seem like scams.
Mm-hmm.
And I am certainly aware that there are scholarships that are not legit out there, but maybe it's my experience having done this for, I guess it's about 10 years now, if you count the time with my son, that I don't know where these people are finding these quote scam scholarships. And maybe they're using the word scam differently than me. Just because your kid doesn't win a scholarship doesn't mean that scholarship was a scam. If somebody wins it, it's a real scholarship.
Mhm.
And I often feel like this all these scholarships are scams, or all I do is get spam email from these scholarship websites, is maybe a bit of an excuse to opt out of the process. Any
Mhm.
thoughts on that?
Yes, I literally agree with everything you just said. I think that I mean I hear the same thing too. You know, I think one of the big barriers to applying for scholarships is finding them and
Yeah.
not hitting a brick wall at the end, and you go through this whole process of creating your profile and all this, and it's a
Hmm.
dead link, or
Yeah.
it's a scholarship where you do all of the work to create a profile, and only in the fine print when you get to like the third page does it say you need to be a resident of, Louisiana.
Hmm.
And you're like,
Yeah.
what the
Yep.
heck, it didn't say that up front. So that's
Yeah.
not necessarily scam, but that's just that's frustrating, and that's
Yeah.
part of the process. If scholarships were super easy, right, then
Everybody
everybody,
would do it and
right,
everybody would win.
exactly. So
Yeah.
that's already like the first test.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
part of the screening process is, do you have it in you? Do you have the motivation? Do you have the skills? Do you have the support? Do you have the drive to like persist when you hit those brick walls, and
Hmm.
either get through it or walk around it or go in a different direction and find
Yeah.
another one where you don't hit a brick wall. But
Right.
I think that it is hard. And I think it's, if a parent is coming from the perspective of like, well, this is really hard for me, so I'm going to pass it off to my kid, well, that's not
Hmm.
going to get, I mean, I think if a parent were to acknowledge with their students, this is
Sure.
frustrating.
Yeah.
This is
Yep.
really hard.
Yep.
We're in this together. Maybe I can help find some.
Yes.
Maybe you can help find some. We're obviously in Dave's program, so he's going to give us a whole bunch, right? Like, I feel like if it were from a sense of we are taking action together, we are winning together, we're experiencing the same frustrations together. So a kid doesn't feel like you don't get it. This is like
Hmm.
none of these work. You don't get it.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that if you don't apply to the scholarship, if you do not take the action, then you're not going to end up with the magic.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
and you might go through all the effort and not win it, but like you don't know, you still might, and it's very possible.
Yeah.
But you
Yep.
will not get that scholarship money if you don't apply.
Yep. 100%.
Um, Yeah, but I think I stand firmly behind action is the closest thing to magic, because that's behind every single thing we do, whether it's applying for scholarships, whether it's
Absolutely.
applying to colleges, whether it's going for the promotion, whether it's making the phone call we don't want to make, all the
Yeah.
things.
Yep.
All the things.
Well, Katie, as we're wrapping up, you mentioned that it was a unique introduction, and I realize now that I actually didn't formally introduce you. So a little backwards here, but why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us what you do, tell us where people can find you, how you work with students and families, and we'll wrap up with that.
Sure. So I'm an executive function coach. I specialize in ADHD, and I have a master's degree in special education. So, as a high school special education teacher for a long time, I've been doing this for 20 years. I do private coaching for students, and I also have a digital study skills program where I teach these how to learn skills like organization, time management. I'm on Instagram at SchoolHabits. You can learn more about my program, my online course, SchoolHabitsUniversity.com. And I mean, please connect with me. I love talking to our audience. We share an audience, and I hope that the folks listening got some value from this conversation today. I know that even, if you're interviewing me, I'm getting just as much out of these conversations as the listeners are. So thank you for having
Yeah.
me on.
Oh, well, thank you so much for what you do and for coming back on the show. And it's funny, I gave my freshman, sophomore, and junior cohorts parents some homework last week. And part of that homework was to listen to some podcasts, and yours was one of about five that I said is a must listen. So
I love it.
again,
Thank
yeah,
you. That's the Learn and Work Smarter podcast. It's
there you
it's
go.
fun.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yep.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it.
Great. Well, Katie, I'm sure we'll have you back. Thank you so much again.
Of course. Take care.
Thanks.